Oh my God! Yes, you're here.
Yes, the Phantasmagorium show is proud to present Idols, Snakes, and Skulls, Indiana Jones retrospective. We are on our fourth episode, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. We found Scotty in the museum, but then he kind of got tangled up in something, but reassured us he'd be fine, and then got sucked into another dimension. But that might be for the best. Steve
Yeah,
is
keep.
still lost in the museum.
Yeah, as they say, keep them.
Yes. So the movie that didn't exactly have development hell, but almost got made in '96. And it seems like Harrison and George were really gung ho to do it, and Spielberg was just trying to come up with every excuse in the book not to make it. Uh, Namely, the release of Independence Day, Mars Attacks. Like, well, we can't do this now. And I don't know what exactly finally got it going again after, probably because Lucas finished the prequel trilogy. He's like, well, I want to do this now. And Spielberg's like, oh, okay. Uh, yeah, kind of. I remember the announcement kind of came out of nowhere, and they had that poster that's just the hat and the whip sitting on the corner of the crate. And I was like super excited. I was like, oh man, I'm ready for this. And I remember on release day walking a couple miles to the theater to go and see it. And it was different. It still recycles the formula of the first and third film, racing for a mythical object, check. Villain who will meet their demise because they can't give up their obsession, check. A big chase sequence, check. A creepy crawly sequence, check. Female co-lead, check. Because it's like you're running through all these boxes.
And
Uh, mhm.
and monkeys.
Yeah, and monkeys. But to me, it felt like, unlike the first three movies, which felt kind of authentic in a way. I mean, minus the part where they're eating monkey brains for dessert in Temple of Doom. Uh, like this movie felt the need to shoehorn in everything that was going on at the time. It's like, oh, it's the atomic age, we got to have that. Or oh, it's the Red Scare, and oh, greasers and jocks, or whatever the equivalents were called, and oh, aliens and Soviet. It's like it felt like you're cramming everything in there to the point that it doesn't feel authentic as much anymore. And while there's a lot of CGI, which is not good, uh, some good, some bad, a lot of it just from the cinematography looked too polished. Like I was surprised to find there wasn't as much CG as I thought there was. It's just that it looks so crisp, almost like they DNR'd everything. Like even the scene right outside the warehouse in the beginning is so overblown in the lighting that it looked really artificial, like it was shot on a soundstage with green screen or something like that. And that kind of bugged me because I like in the 4K transfers of the first three movies, they retained all the dirt and grime and the filmic quality to it. So it still feels like you're watching an Indiana Jones movie. This just looked really different. But I
It
don't hate it as much as everybody else.
Yeah, it didn't feel as thin as the last three because of
Yeah.
how polished it looks, and it went from a spotlight fetish to a kink at that moment.
Yeah. What were your memories of seeing it for the first time, Ernesto?
I went opening weekend with my dad, and it's funny how the movie is set in 1957, which is the year my father was born. So we have that connection at least. And I remember my dad was frustrated with the Kate Blanchett character because every single time she did something, he's like, "She is way too good at this. There is no way, no villain is this precise, this perfect, this good." Because, and we'll discuss it in the movie, but the scene with the killer ants, how she crashes the car and all of a sudden she's sitting there in the corner pointing a gun at them, and my dad's like, "Oh, you gotta be kidding me." So it was a fun movie, even down to the very controversial cold open. We still had a good time. We enjoyed ourselves. It wasn't like the last three, no, but it was another Indiana Jones adventure. It had all the callbacks. It had all the one-liners. It had Shia, which we'll get to him soon, and no, I had a good time. It might not be as grand as the last three, but it's still a good time.
How about you, Tom? What are your memories seeing it for the first time and your thoughts and all that?
At first, I kind of liked it, and it just, I don't know. It seemed like it was just a little too late, that they waited a little too long to do it. I mean, had they done it in '96, it probably would have been better because then we probably would have they could have waited and then done a fifth one, and then now we'd be probably getting like the sixth one as a final one, having them all even numbered, And I watched, I rewatched it today. I had fun with it. I just had fun watching it, but I really think the Kate Blanchett character is more. I don't know. I just still watching it, even though she is speaking perfect Russian, from what I've been told. I'm just expecting her to go, "Watch out, we got to get moose and squirrel." So I feel I just feel that it was a little too overblown with the Russian character. But the character Mac, even watching it for the first time, reminded me of Ricky Gervais. And he looked like him. And then I found out that they originally wanted him in it, but he didn't want to do it. So I guess they got Ray Winstone and made him up to look like what Ricky Gervais would have looked like. And that character was just all over the place. The character Mac, was he helping out? Was he not helping out? Was he an agent, a double agent, triple agent? That character is all over the place and really didn't feel like it fit the story.
Yeah, that's another thing they shoehorned in there. Oh, it's the 50s. We got to have spies, that kind of thing.
Yeah, but
the Cold War.
Yeah, with the Cold War and everything like that. And then him going to getting caught by the government, and the two government agents telling him, they think he's a communist. So you're getting the McCarthy stuff thrown in there.
Yeah.
So I think what they really wanted to do with that was at least say, okay, this is the time that it's in. These are the little pieces that we have going through, so you know exactly what little bits of history was going on. So they tried to pepper that in. That's fine. Absolutely fine. The only thing that I didn't quite like was the fact that it just felt like there was something missing from this film. And I still can't put my finger on it. I don't know what it is that was missing from this film.
More cowbell?
Huh?
More cowbell?
Yeah, more cowbell. Well, I was gonna go for Scott, but that's a whole other story. I would say what was probably missing from this was maybe some heart to it. I mean, it don't get me wrong. There's lots of action in it, great action in it. With the giant bugs and everything like that. But I feel that the Marion character was a bit forced, a little bit, almost. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just after a while, watching it again, it's like she just slides right in there, and they pick up where they left off almost. And when you get to Mutt, we'll all discuss that part, because I don't know. I don't think I could have dealt with the combing of the hair every 5 minutes.
Oh God!
Tom, he's a greaser. It's part of the greaser lore.
Oh jeez. Well, it's like, again, the McCarthyism thing. How Jones kind of gets forced out of his teaching job too. That's another thing. We have McCarthyism. We have spies, aliens. Reds, the Reds, and the greasers, and the atom bombs. I was like, I don't know. George said he wanted to do, like, he changed the cinematic antecedent from being a 30s Republic serial to being a 50s sci-fi B movie. It's like, that's not what Indiana Jones is. Like, you're changing the DNA of what the character is and represents. Like, for instance, the first 3 films set in the 30s, there's no references whatsoever to the Great Depression, or the New Deal, or it's just there exists in those worlds, and it's telling its own story. This feels like it's trying to be a little cartoonish because it's trying to homage everything that's going on at the time, in the sense that it truly does feel like a 50s B movie. Kate Blanchett, as you mentioned, you thought of her more as Natasha from Rocky and Bullwinkle. I think it's my least favorite Cate Blanchett performance. It was just I thought it was just really grating and just seemed too fake. And it's like, no, sorry, I'm not there for it. Now the opening with, they do the Paramount Mountain as like a prairie dog hill.
Yeah.
And you have the Elvis Hound Dog playing, which seems, okay, that's again, you're trying to 50s, I get it. And the way they just kind of sneak onto the base and you have the big 51 on the hangar, like, okay, we're at Area 51, I get it. I admit, I kind of...
It does make sense that all that is located in Area 51, including a cameo from a certain artifact. It does make sense.
Yes, I did get kind of nerding out a bit when I'm like, oh, cool, they're going inside the warehouse and you see all those crates and boxes. But it's kind of crazy to think that, that first shot when they open the doors and the camera's pulling back to reveal it all and you could tell it's CG. Whereas the matte painting they used to extend the building at the end of Raiders looks more photoreal. And that kind of takes me out of it a bit.
Yeah.
I thought that was a good action scene, though. I thought that was fun. And I liked the reference to the artifact and seeing, it's like, oh, cool, there it is. I kind of wish Indy got to see it. And then the fight scenes that he has with the main, Soviet henchman, who's a guy from Cirque du Soleil, actually. I thought that was cool. And blasting off on the rocket car, but then they turn it into weird, goofy style humor with all the prairie dogs watching and Indy kind of, rolling off the side of it. It's saying that Indy was at Roswell, and it's like, okay, doesn't really make sense why you want him there if it's, alien, but okay. Yeah, fun little action sequence. I'm not sure it was a very good idea to take what was supposed to be the original climax of Back to the Future and have it follow up this scene, because in the original script for Back to the Future, they were supposed to use an atomic test to power the DeLorean Back to the Future, and they realized that would have been too expensive. It would have been too hokey. It takes you too far away from the story of what's going on with Marty and his parents, and it's not as iconic. And my understanding is that they've tried to put that sequence into other movies, and they could just never find a place to put it. And then it kind of like with Hitchcock coming up with the crop duster scene, that he couldn't find a movie to put that in, so eventually he just put it in North by Northwest.
Yeah.
And yeah, you have that big controversial moment with the lead-lined refrigerator. And I remember with, the actual atomic bombs, if you had clothing and stuff on, you wouldn't really be burnt. If you're assuming you're out of the vaporization radius, you wouldn't really be burned under your clothes. It would be on any part of your skin that was exposed.
Yeah.
So it's not out of the realm of possibility you would survive inside that. It's just the fact that it takes off like a rocket and tumbles a million times over, and you just roll out like, no broken bones, nothing. It's fine.
Yeah. And even the YouTube channel, How It Should Have Ended, they animated kind of like...
I actually was thinking about that today when you see the atomic bomb drop. And I thought of that whole Back to the Future thing today, and it popped into my head for no reason, and I was like, "That's right." They were, and I thought, "Oh, Spielberg is pulling in 1941 here."
Yeah. So, what'd you think of what'd you guys think of the opening sequence in the warehouse, and then the follow up in the little atomic city?
Well, as I was saying earlier, the YouTube channel, How It Should Have Ended, they animated how that scene should have gone down after it exploded and Indy goes flying into the refrigerator. When it comes out, he's like this, ah! Ah! My bones! Why would I do that? Why? And I found it like, yeah, that would be how it would.
Did Ernesto speak yet? Did Ernesto speak up yet?
Yeah.
Okay, so waiting for me. Okay.
Yeah, it's a you thing.
No.
Wait,
I'm sorry.
Wait. Tom, I think there's a delay. I've been talking for a while.
Yeah.
What was the question again? I'm sorry.
So what did you think of the whole opening sequence at the warehouse and then the follow up in Atomic City and all that?
Okay. So that whole opening sequence with the car racing the army car I like that. Because that really says, okay, this is the 50s. Here's the music. It's telling you it's 55, 56 maybe. And then you get to the bass. They're not letting anybody on. And then comes that smooth move where the guy salutes them and then bends down to tie his shoe and they shoot them all. They go onto the bench, onto the base, and they take out Ray Winstone. Ray Winstone is Mac, but the reveal of Indiana Jones in this film was different than all the other ones. It was iconic in a way where, you see him like have to pick up his hat. Like, no, this stays on my head. This can't be.
I'm going to interrupt you real quick to say thanks. Hunter Becknell sends a $5 super chat. Says, I can't stick around, but I appreciate this channel and the discussion. Well, yeah, we got tons of content here on our playlist for you to check out. Thanks for the super chat, and hope you can catch us on the replay. But yeah, thank you. Oh yeah, continue.
Thank you, Hunter. And then you get the reveal of Kate Blanchett, or as I will refer to her tonight as Natasha. And she comes out, and it's just like the guy's going to hit him. She stops the guy from hitting Indy, and she's like, "You're going to do this. You're gonna show us where we're going to go." They get to the warehouse, and she's like, "I'm looking for a box." He goes, "What do you think? I think I know where this box is." She goes, "You were there." He goes, "No, I wasn't. I don't know what you're talking about." And she explains the box that she's looking for, and he goes,
Down
"Look,
to the last detail.
I don't know what's in there." And I think I really liked, even though I know it was a bit sci-fi, was when he got the gun bullets, the gunpowder, and he throws it, and you start to see it dash across the warehouse where the box is. And at first they didn't want to give him the bullets. He goes, "I need gunpowder. You want my help? You give me the gunpowder, you get what you want." And that whole scene, if you're going to want to view it through first timer eyes, which I can do that.
Oh no.
Well, this is a good time to say this isn't a recap video, but I'm thinking he liked it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't expect it to turn out the way it did, with him swinging across the rafters with the whip.
Wait, you see, that's another thing. When he's swinging across and he misses it, he literally crashes through the windshield of the truck, which has a steel center divide between the windshields. Snaps it like a twig, and it does nothing to him, which is a far cry from what you'd see in the first three movies.
Well, at least it'll explain why he survives the refrigerator impact. He's that durable.
But you know what? I really loved that atomic train that they had. When you push this thing and it goes really fast, and they're both holding on for dear life. And when it slows down, you just see these both like, oh God. And they're both so out of it. Indy comes out of it like that and runs off and hides. And the other guy's just standing there like, oh, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And it's amazing that they didn't look where Indy was when looking for him, that they passed by him.
Yeah.
But that's a great, I really like that scene. That's a great scene, though, with that train. Because in some ways, I kind of want to ride it, but knowing how fast it goes, it's like, no.
At least not anymore.
Too much.
Yeah. And then to kind of piggyback on that whole sequence with him trying to find the box, and because it's powered by a magnetism, so he needs gunpowder and the shells. I kind of like that detail that he's kind of like depowering them as they're trying to locate it, and they're not aware that he's taking away their grenades, their shotgun shells as much as he can, because eventually it's going to turn into a gunfight. But he's trying to give himself a bit of an advantage.
Right. That's smart. And I don't really get also why in the warehouse thing when Indy's cornered, when you get to the I like Ike part, what is the purpose of Mac blowing his cover right then? It's like all the Russians are still aiming. It's like it doesn't make a difference if he's standing next to him with a gun at the head. It's like he's still gonna get shot if that's what it's gonna come to. It's like, save your bullets for later, Mac. And don't overplay your hand. But so that was a little weird. But I thought that was a good action scene. But again, the way it was shot, a lot of it just looked really CG-y. Like they're trying to, again, emulate a 50s B sci-fi movie. And in the way it looks and everything, which felt a little off. Whereas Atomic Town, when you go in there, it just seems so out of place to see a rugged, run-down Indiana Jones running into this pitch-perfect 50s town with Howdy Doody Time playing on the TV.
Yeah.
I'm like, what is this?
Another nod just Back to the Future.
Yeah,
Right.
He walked into the How Don't Worry Darling universe for a second.
Exactly. And the thing when he's trying to get in the fridge and he's pushing the cartons of milk or whatever out of the way and the fruit so he can close it, that's like a callback to when he had to grab the hat under the door in Temple of Doom and when he had to grab the whip under the other falling door at the beginning of Raiders, except now he's throwing something away from there. It's like, okay, that's a nice way to do a callback without, being too open about it. But yeah, it's something that, I like the action and stuff, but a lot of it does, the look takes me out of it a bit, and at times that they're trying to throw in the goofy humor. Like, for instance, Raiders, the opening sequence didn't really have humor per se. It was just kind of eerie and really intense and kind of dramatic. It's like, ooh, what's going on? Whereas Temple of Doom does the exact opposite with a musical number, and then it just becomes a really fun shootout. And Crusade, it's also more or less fun. And in this movie, it's also a bit fun and goofy. And I'm kind of longing for an opening sequence in an indie movie which feels more like Raiders. That sense of foreboding, that sense of real adventure or something. This was okay, they're kind of here, and admittedly the fact that the Russians just stroll onto the base very easily, and there's, other than that one checkpoint, there's literally no other defenses out here at Area 51.
Kind of makes you wonder how the introduction to Dial of Destiny will go down.
Right, and that seems to, I remember in the Dial of Destiny trailer, you see him in the de-aging part, he's wearing, like when they take the hood off of his head, and you see that he has like a German army uniform on, which plays into what he told when Mac tells him, what were we in the war? What were we in Berlin? He's like, double agents. So it seems like they're going to be, homaging that, but I doubt that Mac is going to show up in that sequence. But so there's that.
There's nothing wrong with a de-age Ray Winstone, but
no, not at all. Not at all. So then the atomic bombing thing happens, and if you look closely at the mushroom cloud, it looks like it's becoming like a skull as it's rising, where you see the smoke in the eyes or whatnot. So that's kind of okay. We're at this scene, and
I like this scene just because I wonder if at some point, as Indiana is looking at pretty much the power of God in front of him, it's just like, whoo, well, I'm gonna just get out of here. You guys handle the cleanup duty. Bye.
Yeah, and the fact that the guys from the government, I don't know if they were CIA, FBI, or who, were like questioning his loyalty and all that. It's like, okay, clearly they must have scrubbed the file of when they actually hired him to go after the Ark against the Nazis and that kind of stuff. But then the other general, whoever, walks in and backs him up. And it's like, well, oh, you helped her do this and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, she murdered everybody at the checkpoint and, raided your warehouse. Like, what? It's not really his fault. So it's like, and when he says, oh, yeah, you want all these medals, but does he deserve them? I just wanted Indy to leap across the desk and sucker punch that guy.
I know.
Great Shiva.
Yeah, exactly. Great Shiva.
That needs to be
exactly.
a t-shirt. That needs to be a t-shirt.
Yeah. And then I like that they follow that up with him losing his job at the school. And Jim Broadbent was nice to see a little cameo, basically as the new Marcus, I guess, and how they've actually built a big bronze statue to Marcus out in the campus, out on the lot or out on the lawn.
Yeah,
but
it does have a nice callback later when they show it again.
Yeah, and when he gets back, I like when he gets back to his house that they do talk about Marcus and his father. How it's like, it's been a rough couple of years. First dad, then Marcus. And Jim says that great line. He says, "Seems we've reached that point where life stops giving us things and starts taking them away," which I thought that was sort of a Chekhov's gun type thing. Like it was going to echo more or less the themes of the movie. Because Indy's kind of apologizing to him for doubting him or whatnot, and it's like, well, wonder how much he's gonna lose in this one. But then that doesn't really come back.
I do find it weird that after they have the whole conversation about what had to happen for him to leave the school to make sure that he gets his pension or retirement or whatever that's intact, that immediately within the same day he's already like, all right, well, maybe I'll go to England. I have a favor to call in and I'll teach over there. And he's already on the train, and the next scene I'm just like, is this happening the same day? You're just gonna leave?
I'm guessing that's probably from his own experience of what happens to other people who fall under the veil of McCarthyism and how they get, ostracized. And he's probably thinking, well, I'm going to get out of Dodge before my entire reputation is, raked over the coals. I'll just be gone and I'll be out of sight, out of mind or something.
Well, something, the college part where he's on the campus before they do the bike chase and everything like that. That was done up at Yale, up in Connecticut. And I remember that day because I remember it being all over the news that they were filming up there. Mm-hmm. And they were showing like them filming and stuff on the news. And I was like, man, I would have loved to have gone up there that day. But I remember specifically where I was on that day. I was literally working in a video store that day. And before I even knew that stuff was going on, I put on one of the Indiana Jones films in the video store. And then later that day, when I was looking through my phone or looking through the internet, I was like, oh, wow, they're filming up at Yale. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That brings us to one of the most universally derided aspects of this film, when you have the callback to the Wild One with Mutt Williams entering the picture on his motorcycle, trying to do a Marlon Brando impression. It's like, no, just no. You're no Marlon Brando, kid. And basically being the one who's going to drag Indy back into this. And it's like, okay, so they go to the restaurant and they're talking, and he's such a jerk to Indy, just like constantly insulting him at the table. It's like, dude, you went to this guy for help. You're out of options, and you're just going to barrage him with insults. It's like, really?
Hey, that's my mother. That's my mother you're talking about. That's my mother. I'm like, okay, are we a little bit have a attachment syndrome here with your mom?
It's like, oh, you're a teacher. Well, that's a big help. It's like, geez. It's like,
But you know what? It's perfect, though.
You know what, kid? Your mother's a hoe.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, you probably should have told him that.
And then he's like, did you know her, Mary Williams? No, no, that's what he goes. Oh, I know a lot of Marys. Hey, that's my mother you're talking about. I'm like, what? It's not like he called her a name or anything like that. He's like, I don't remember a Mary Williams.
Yeah, I've met a lot of Marys. You got to be more specific, kid.
Yeah, that was really weird. And then, of course, we have to have, like he says, sorry, kid, you brought a knife to a gunfight, and you have this, the two Russians show up, and for some reason, one of them his face or something reminds me a bit of Brendan Fraser for some reason. And it's like, and that kept distracting me throughout this whole, this whole big chase. And of course, they have to start it being really cheesy with the big fight at the bar between the greasers and, what do they just call them, the jocks? I can't even remember what the 50s name is for the squares.
Yeah, they're like the jocks.
Yeah. Positive Fandom says, I did enjoy the scenes at the campus, especially at the sock hop. Right, because they were doing like this sock hop thing amidst this protest at the same time out on the lawn.
Yeah, better dead than red.
Yeah, better dead than red, and you got a sock hop going on at the same time. Like, what like, what is this? It's so bizarre.
Also, who the I don't know how accurate it is to the era, but who the hell combs their hair with soda water? I mean, with Pepsi or Coca-Cola, whatever he's usually. It's like, oh my god, he just put his comb in your drink. At that point, any guy with a sense would be like, hey, motherfucker, what did you just do to my drink?
Yeah, but you know what? It's the stickiness of it that would keep it from moving. I think that's what he did it for. Maybe that's how they did it back then. I don't know. Like, I should look it up.
Back then, we put weird shit in our hair, huh?
But I like the motorcycle chase to the point where the car hits the statue, and then you see
Marcus's
head just smiling, which is a nice nod to him. But the great part was when they go into the library, and the bike slides, and it goes right up to the kid, and the kid it goes up to is Tom Hanks' son.
Yeah.
I did like.
But you know what? You know, the one part that was a callback to Raiders is when he's in the classroom, and the guy goes, "Can I speak to you for a moment?" And he goes, "Sure." All right, everybody read Marcus. You know, that the same person he said in like the first film. So I'm like, I guess these kids are never getting to that subject. They're never getting to learn it. So you keep having to teach it every year.
It is a miracle that anybody passes his class with him always going on his extended leave and spelunking.
I like the punchline to when the head on the Marcus statue breaks off and lands on the car, and Mutt is laughing on the bike, and Indy just.
Yeah, I like that scene because it kind of reminded me. It reminded me of The Last Crusade because on the one hand, he's looking at him very disappointed because he just ruined the statue of his departed friend. But at the second time, because at this point, if you've already seen the movie and you know that's his son, it's a callback to Sean Connery and looking at his son with disdain just because of how he killed people and how he got about, and on a motorcycle, no less, from the Nazis.
When he used the stand thing to flip the bike.
Exactly.
Yeah, and he's like judging him as if that was poor sportsmanship.
Yep, it's like father, like son.
Yeah, so that was funny, and yeah, like you said, more foreshadowing for that, and that other great line when he's telling everybody in the library, it's like, if you want to really learn stuff about archaeology, you got to get out of the library.
Yeah,
and you got to Bill Wilhelm scream.
Yeah, and then that crazy motorcycle chase through the streets, which I can't even remember. How does that chase even end again?
They end up going to the field to get on a plane. They get on a plane, and they bring the motorcycle with them to the place. No. They end up going back to Indy's house to look at the letter. He interprets the letter, and then they decide they're going to go to where this letter is telling them.
They're going to.
They get on a plane, and they take the motorcycle with them. They're on a small plane. How the hell do they get that small motorcycle? That motorcycle that's kind of big onto that small plane. That's the one thing that puzzled me, because it's like a little commuter plane.
I guess what you do is, since the door's narrow enough, you can slide it up in, turn it, get the tire in, turn it sideways to get the handlebars in, and then pull it up vertically to get it in because it's not wide enough, and then turn it on this rear tire to slide it down. But the bigger question is, why did he bring his motorcycle to Peru?
Yeah, we never see it again after. We never see it again after that.
Yeah, and he does mention that. He's like, I left my bike, you know.
Yeah, one of the great things is when they get to Peru and they have that talk, and he goes, "Well, I fought with Pancho Villa." Pancho Villa, and that's a great.
He rode with Pancho Villa.
He rode with him, but the great thing about that line, that scene, it's a great callback to the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, where there is an episode where he does that.
Yeah, so that was a nice
one.
That's a great callback to that.
Pancho Villa? Shit.
And he's like, well, what are you doing with your life, kid? He's like, well, I'm going to be a mechanic. And he's like, is that really what you want to do? He's like, yeah, you got a problem with it? He's like, no, don't let anybody tell you different. If that's what you want to do. Do what you love.
God, he's got such a chip on his shoulder.
Yeah. Positive Fandom says, I wondered about the motorcycle too on the plane. Yeah, I didn't actually think about that until Tom just brought it up, and then I just kind of jerry-rigged the solution in my head. But I guess that might be how they did it. But I also thought with that tiny plane, it reminded me of the Lausche freight plane from Temple of Doom. Yeah. That type of plane.
Yeah. Or there could be a behind the scenes where everybody's trying to calm Harrison Ford down because he doesn't want the motorcycle on the plane because it doesn't make sense in the script. We're not going to see it again. He's like, get off my plane.
Yeah. So he's just sitting there on the plane and he puts the hat over his head. It's like, yeah, I'm going to get my sleep now. I'm so tired now.
It is 3:00 in the afternoon. I need my nap.
Yeah, like Indy, Temple of Doom, just lounging back with his hat over his head, and something that Alan Grant did the same thing in Jurassic Park 3 in the plane. He's like, I'm just gonna sleep here in the plane.
Yeah,
don't bug me. Leave me alone.
I think at this point, as much as an Indiana Jones trait as it is a Steven Spielberg character trait, just put your hat over your head and go to sleep.
And then another thing they did while they were at Indy's house is they started digging into the lore of the story, and he's talking about how Francisco de Orellana went looking for the skull and blah blah blah. And I'm thinking, well, no, he didn't. And usually these movies obviously repurpose history or mythology by coming up with things that could be true or things that aren't. And this one, you're taking something of a renowned explorer, which we know what he was doing. He was charting the Amazon, trying to get to the other side. And you're saying that he went missing looking for the skull when in reality he died of disease and he brought his body back. He's like, it's not a mystery as to what happened to this guy in reality.
That's what they want you to think, Kat, but he actually went missing.
Yeah, and so this one does get a little bit more because the thing about like with Raiders of the Lost Ark, it's like, well, given that there's a bunch of theories as to what happened to it, just because the theory they came up with in the movie isn't one that's been proposed before doesn't mean it's not possible mythologically or historically or whatnot. But this one, it's like they're outright, making the same thing with, I guess, the legend of the three brothers. And I'm not sure if that comes from King Arthur lore for Last Crusade or not, or the going up to the top of the mountain for Shiva and giving the three rocks to create the world. But usually it's kind of, generic, or they're not being specific on who these people are. But with this one, they're taking a very well-known explorer with a very well-known fate. And, and I thought, okay, that's kind of, that's a little bit interesting.
Maybe that's why they chose it, because he is well known, and his adventures kind of fit the narrative they wanted to mold into.
Because they find out from locals that Oxley was locked in a sanatorium, and they go in there and they find all the drawings everywhere, and that's the first time where the tough guy persona on Mutt starts to crack. And I'm thinking, okay, you're kind of getting fed up with you at this point. It's like. Here we have somebody new in the chat. Yite23 says, never seen the movies, but the Lego game was pretty lit. Yes, it was. Those were very fun.
Also, how dare you? Go watch those movies.
Yeah, absolutely. Go see the movies. They're pretty cool.
The Lego game is really fun. And I do love how the Lego Indiana Jones has great Star Wars references in it, and the Star Wars Lego game has lots of Indiana Jones references in it.
Yeah,
themselves.
I remember the theme. It goes dun 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 dun. That it does.
Fun fact: my dad has that as my sound whenever I call. Still,
nice. So I know. Then we get to the interesting plot point where Oxley had written all over the cell the word "return," and Indy's kind of puzzled about it and decides that they have to go to this cemetery where the other explorers from Orion were possibly buried. And this is admittedly a weird scene. For starters, you wouldn't be able to see the Nazca lines in Cusco, Peru. They're too far away, but it does look like a neat visual when you see them fly overhead and you see it. The cemetery is clearly, there's no caretaker here, obviously. But there are these strange people who move around and try and kill them with poison darts. And it's not clear why they're there or why they're so hostile. And I think, if I remember correctly, we actually do see Mutt's motorcycle. I think he left it up against a tree at the cemetery, and that's how they got up there on the hill. Because he does mention later after they get kidnapped that, I left my bike, because that was something.
One of the guys that attacks them, it's Ernie Reyes Jr. And if you don't know who he was, Ernie Reyes Jr. was in a little movie called, it was on a television show called Sidekicks back in the 80s. And he also did a lot of stunt work on like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movies as well. And I believe he ended up, I think he got sick and needs a kidney transplant, something like that. I don't know how he's doing as of now, but I knew for a while that he was sick.
Yes, which one should I watch first? And I responded, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Because definitely start with the first one. And Temple of Doom's a prequel, you'll notice that, but kind of not really, because there are different reasons for that. But so they have this weird fight scene, and you have the line where he's like, Mutt finally kind of comes to some appreciation for Indy. He's like, "You're a teacher?" He's like, "Yeah, part-time." Total trailer moment. But it's kind of, I'm like, okay, so we have that there, and they go inside, and you have the joke about the scorpion. Oh, big one, it bit me, it was huge. He's like, oh, good. Big one bites you, no big deal. Little one bites you, don't keep it to yourself. And I'm thinking, well, if the little one bites you out there, you're probably going to die, and you won't be able to tell anybody anyway, because they'll be healing over and so when they go in and you see these mummies that are just lying there, and it's like, okay, so I guess these people who are attacking them have been like the protectors of this. They're like the believers in Akator and the myth, the lost city of El Dorado type thing that Indy was talking about. And I guess that's why they're there. They're defending it because they don't want the skull to be found. And I mean, when they cut it open, the prop of the skull is admittedly really gorgeous. And it has that magnetic kind of quality, and it's really buzzing. And I'm kind of enjoying the movie up through this point. It's like, okay, fun adventure. Feels like a little reminiscent of Last Crusade, going underground through the catacombs to try and find, the next clue in the tomb type of thing. And that neat effect where they rip rip the bandages off and the guy's face just decomposes in the space of like 10 seconds.
Yeah. Now, at this point, let me ask, when we see the crystal skull, when, we find it because of the magnetism, which, by the way, this is selective magnetism. It's not always turned on. It only turns on when we need the plot for it to turn on, by the way. Yeah. When we see the skull, did we all immediately think aliens at that moment?
Yes.
I did.
Yes. It reminded me of the xenomorph head. It makes me wonder if that's what they were going for. Because I know Spielberg didn't want it to look too much like Close Encounters.
Yeah. I thought it was aliens because Indy already said it was at the beginning of the movie when Spalko was interrogating him about, the skull and what's inside. That aircraft there, the Air Force fiasco in 47 and blah, blah, blah. But I did notice the fact that the skull had such an elongated head. Mm-hmm. I'm like, that's when I went, okay, they're doing Chariots of the Gods, because you see all that, because a lot of them in their religions, they like bind the infants' heads to kind of expand it, that they used to do a long time ago, like centuries ago, thousands of years. And uneducated people look at that and say, oh, it must be aliens. But, scholars with PhDs who studied this their whole lives can tell you what that stuff means. And no, it's not aliens. It's not,
but yeah, go for it.
But go for it. It works. India, I've never honestly had a problem with it being aliens, because to me, that's no more out there crazy than the Ark of the Covenant or the Shankara Stones, or the Holy Grail. It's like, oh, whatever, we'll just do this.
Everything is supernatural, and to an extent, spacemen are supernatural in their own way.
Yeah, especially since these are interdimensional beings instead of. That was a funny story Spielberg told too, where he's like, Lucas finally called Spielberg back like 10 years after they saw Independence Day and weren't going to do it, and he's like, Steven, I think you're right about this whole aliens thing. And he's like, oh, thank you, George. Thank you so much. You finally get it. You came around. He's like, yeah, they're not aliens. They're interdimensional beings.
I'm like,
It's
God
like
damn it.
what? And it's like,
Yeah. You
and
just
then
gotta
George is
you
trying
gotta
to
love their friendship. You just gotta love their friendship.
yeah, and George is trying to explain it to him, and Steven's like he's like, just fine, George, whatever, just do, just roll with it.
Yeah. Here are
Uh,
these two guys who at the peak of their fame, billionaires, and have got all the accolation, and all of a sudden he gets a phone call. They're interdimensional space people. He's like, oh, God damn it, George.
the positive fandom says yes, that skull looks like an alien and possibly gray hybrid to me. Absolutely, it's definitely playing on the whole lore of the Greys, which is the classic, frankly unimaginative humanoid alien, which looks as human as ever except for the head and maybe the hands.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, okay, they're playing on the Greys, and something that George kind of did with the Kaminoans in Attack of the Clones. They're very much a play on the Greys. To admittedly, some better results.
Yeah.
Especially since when you see the alien at the end of this movie, it's not gray when it's back in its full form. It's like, like
It's
oh,
got
like
a tan. It's got a tan,
yeah, it's got a tan. And so
especially when you're in South America.
yeah, so we see that Mac and the Russians capture them when they leave with the skull, realizing that they want to return it to Akator. We'll go do that, and they get caught. They get taken to the jungle, and we have the great effect where you see the classic thing where you have the map and you see the red line charting the course as they're heading down the Amazon. And this scene and the stuff that happens, it's like, okay, so Spalco's kind of talking with him, and Indy's kind of getting so caught up in the mystery of what's going on that he doesn't seem to mind that he's like a hostage, or a prisoner. And when he sees Oxley and how crazy he is, and they're like, oh, the skull did it, and he's a lunatic, and blah blah blah, and trying to figure all this stuff out, and it's like he's getting a little too wrapped up in it. And I have to admit that Mutt Williams is the only one who seems to be somewhat smart by realizing they're going to have to get out of here, and that's when Marion shows up, and their whole relationship at this point is pretty much them fighting with each other again and bickering like an old married couple, which even the henchman points out when he's like, God, shut the hell up. He doesn't want to hear it either.
And this is the one henchman who's kind of like the Terminator of the group, and even he is fed up with their fighting. So it's just like, oh, so you do have a weakness.
Yeah, and it's like you knew from the marketing that she was in it, and maybe it would have been better suited for maybe not better suited for the marketing if they kept that a secret, because you mentioned Marion and Indiana Jones, you're going to think Marion anyway, which is why that reunion wasn't great. And so when she reveals that Mutt is her son and Indy's having a hard time with it, she's like, oh, God's sake, Indy, it's not that hard,
Mom.
Yeah. Oh, and I love the bit,
Mom.
I love the bit where he's tied to the chair and they're using the skull to try and we find out what Spalco's evil plan is. She's into things like MK Ultra and psychic warfare, and she wants to gain the knowledge from all the skulls and use them to brainwash everybody through radio waves, brainwash the West across the world to conquer. It's like, okay, so you got an evil plan. Similar to Molaram wanting to use his blood of Kali to brainwash everybody, take over the world, that type of stuff. And I love John Williams' score when Indy's just strapped in the chair looking at the skull. Seemed so haunting and eerie, and the shot of it was so gorgeous.
Yeah, and I like that in any other movie, an editor would be like putting flashing images across the screen about what he's looking at or what's being imprinted in his brain. But here you have John Williams' score and Harrison Ford's acting to convey that whatever's going on in his brain is fucking him up really bad.
Mm-hmm. And even Mac is the one who finally steps in to kind of save him, saying, that's enough. If you brainwash him too much, he'll be useless if you turn him into Oxley. And so, and then, like Indy said, I'm going to break your nose if the minute I'm out of this chair, comrade. Because, like, when he says, oh, it's not about money, it's about a gigantic pile of money. I'm like, okay, you're one of those people. Classic adventure trope character, kind of like, Satipo or other from Raiders and that kind of stuff. And so that was funny when he actually does punch him in the nose. He's like, Indy. He's like, I told you.
You broke my nose.
Positive Fandom asks, what did the skull do to Indy? Well, it seems to be like he's transfixed by it. He can't close his eyes. He's starting to like convulse in the chair a little bit. And, kind of like what we saw happen to Oxley. He stared at the skull for too long, and it turned him into a Looney Tunes guy, where the only thing he could focus on is the riddle for what the skull wants, which is to be taken back to Akator. So it's like the skull, by brainwash, it's like when you stare at it long enough, it's like it's brainwashing you to do what it wants, which is to go back to its people, which means that Spalco's plan can't work anyway, because the skull has its own sentience. It has its own intentions. It's not going to do what she wants it to do. And so it starts doing that to Indy, like it's speaking to him kind of, until, Mac puts a stop to it.
Yeah, he got brainwaved.
Yeah.
So here's some information here. Karen Allen was not aware her character was in the script until Steven Spielberg called her in January of 2007, saying, It's been announced we're making Indiana Jones 4, and guess what? You're in it again. And Karen greeted Spielberg the same way Marion greeted Indiana Jones back in that bar in Tibet, given their notoriously problematic relationship. That's cool. Steven Spielberg.
Wait, you mean she walked up?
Yeah.
Wait, you mean she walked up to him and decked him? That's what she does to Indy.
Yeah, I bet she went up to him and went, Steven Spielberg, I always knew you'd walk into my bar again, or whatever she said. But
I would pay great money to see her whack him in the face.
Oh God!
I'll tell you this: is that Harrison Ford is in such good shape. They didn't have to adjust the suit. He was, and Spielberg said that looking at the shots, he couldn't tell if he was looking at the third Indiana Jones or the fourth one. And the studio wanted the whip to be computer generated. And Harrison Ford said, the hell with that. I'm doing it for real. This is how it's going to go. And they did what he wanted. And he did the majority of his stunts. And he said that he left his hair gray, the way going gray and stuff like that, because he wanted people to know it was him and not the back of some stuntman's head. And he really does a fantastic job in this movie for, I think he was in the 70s then?
No.
60s, 70s at that time?
65. 65 when
Yeah, 65, but the character was in the late 50s, starting early 60s.
Yeah, character was 58 years old and he was 65.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he did. That was really great.
Although, you know what? Now that you bring that up, you know what? Let's just admit it. He survived a few plane crashes. I think we can all admit he could survive the nuking the fridge scene by himself.
Absolutely. Yeah. I do have it.
That's a great thing. I meant to bring that up last night when he's on the plane and his father goes, oh, you know how to fly? And he goes, fly, yes. No, it was the second one when he goes, fly, yes, land, no. And he said the same thing in The Last Crusade.
No, that's what he says in The Last Crusade.
Yeah.
He doesn't say it that way. When Willie asks him, she's like, no, you know how to fly a plane, right? And he's like, no, do you? And then he's like, okay, talking himself through it. But they never get to talking about landing because they realize they're about to crash. But
in reality, he's a great pilot, but just doesn't know how to land.
And casting John Hurt in the role that was Oxley, who was supposed to be Abner Ravenwood earlier, which, again, I don't understand why this franchise keeps trying to bring a non-character back, but okay. Like they were going to do the Abner Ravenwood series on Disney Plus. It's like, why? What is the obsession with Abner? I don't know. But I guess this is a situation where, John Hurt probably really wanted to be an Indiana Jones film, because I feel that almost anybody could have played this role, because he's just kind of, delirious and stuff. Like you're not using John Hurt's talents necessarily for this. And I thought it was funny how he's basically entertaining all the Soviets around the campfire. And how Spalco is just fine with this. She's not going to interrogate him around the clock, and he, keeps spooling out the riddle, and Indy is just getting so wrapped up in the mystery, trying to figure out what's going on, and how Mutt is the one who finally is looking at this and is like, my God, he's getting obsessed, just like Alec Guinness in Bridge on the River Kwai, where he loses sight of what he's supposed to be doing, and so he just flips the table over and sets the tent on fire, and they run off into the jungle, where Indy decides to give us a history lesson about why the quicksand is not actually quicksand.
Yeah, thanks for that, Indy.
Yeah.
I like that the quicksand was actually quicksand.
And that they use the snake to get him out. And he's like, "Don't say that. Say rope." And he's like, "There's no Sears and Roebuck around here. Grab the snake." And I like that reference because that's back in the era where you used to be able to order a house from Sears Roebuck catalog. And so using so he uses the snake, pulls him out. But the fact that he told Oxley to go get help, and he brings help with the Soviets. And Indy's sarcastically says, "Great, Ox, help." And he's like, "Yeah, help." And I'm thinking, well, what did you expect him to do, Indy? There's nobody else out there to get help from. It's just, it's like, well, he did what you asked him to do.
But it does bring that scene where he and Marion have that argument and she reveals that he's your son. And then his next reaction, why did you let him leave school?
Right, he's your son. Positive Fandom says, John Hurt's character was unintelligible, but I thought he would start to speak normally at some point, which, yes, he does at the very tail end of the movie.
Interdimensional space, people, to be precise.
Yeah, so the whole quicksand thing was pretty much just as an excuse for Marion to tell him the truth that they've already been foreshadowing, that Mutt is his son. And, of course, that's when Indy shows that he's a bit, little hypocritical. It's like, oh, you can do whatever you want, but now that you're a son, you got to finish school and that kind of thing. And from there, we cut to
my son will not betray Shiva.
Yeah, my son. That'd be.
Oh, I'm gonna run that joke to the ground. Just you wait.
So then they start bickering in the truck as they're driving along to Akator, and that's when Igor just gets upset listening to all of them telling him to shut up. He puts gags in their mouth, and Indy finally gets fed up and fights back, kicks him out of the truck, gets a hold of Mutt's knife to cut himself loose, and he gets up in the front of the truck and he comes up with this plan, which is we're going to get Oxley and the skull back and get to Akator before they do. And he's like, grab the wheel, but he doesn't plan that far ahead, and he gets the bazooka and he's like, cover your ears, and just blows away that machine that's just chopping through all the brush. And this whole chase sequence, I gotta say, shot in Hawaii on private property outside of Hilo, I thought it was really good. The swing from the vines like a Tarzan aside. I thought this was a really great action sequence.
Yes, it was. It was actually really fun. I like where they reference Mutt's training with
fencing.
With fencing and how it came into play, and he's going against Colonel Spalko. It's Colonel, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, it's Colonel Spalko, and she's got the grace and elegance, and Mutt. You could even subtly with his moves. His form is all rugged and sluggish, but it also makes sense that if it were Indiana Jones fighting her with a sword, he'd be in the same position, just like a brawler, and no elegance to it. So I like all those subtle cues and details. I like how he just pulls out a bazooka or an RPG and he just shoots the saw blade truck, and he just causes major damage, and they're just like, duck. Your family right there, Indy. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, so that was a really great action chase sequence. I'm glad they finally went back to the jungle, because the first three movies have an overabundance of desert type locations, and so that was really fun. And they get Oxley and the skull back. They do CGI to make it look like they're driving on a big cliffside. That kind of worked reasonably well. Fun scene, and I like how it just immediately bleeds into the ants, even though the ants unfortunately are CGI. Because I was wondering while I was watching it, I knew that it's like, okay, you did snakes in the first one, bugs in the second one, you did rats in the third. What's it going to be this time? And not crazy about the fact that it's CG. The type of ant species is a real ant species. No, they won't carry whole humans underground and eat them alive. At least not in that way. But it's okay. Action, and then I like that Dovchenko actually does really beat the hell out of Indy. You could tell he's they're not going to have him just, effortlessly knock this guy down, kind of like when he crashed through the truck. It's like, no, he actually gets pushed around quite a lot by this guy.
It's not an Indiana Jones movie unless he fights somebody that's twice his size and beats the crap out of him before he gets the last hurrah.
Right. And then you have little shots that I don't care for, like when Spalko kills the ant between her knees, and it makes you aware of the camera because the guts land on the lens. It's like,
I've never been a fan of that film technique.
right.
It's like, why are you reminding me that there's a lens on screen?
I hate that tech. I hate it. You're right. I don't care for it.
I think the last time I saw it, I really didn't care for it. I think somebody crashed into a porta potty, and the bluish black water falls on the lens afterwards, and I'm like, why did I need to see that?
Yeah, I've seen that in war movies too, where it's like really bloody and butchery, and then you can see it splashing onto the lenses. It's like I never really care for that. What do you think of the big chase sequence in Ant scene, Tom?
All right, I'm gonna get right to the ant scene first because I love that scene because that scene right there feels like something out of a 50s monster movie that you would see in that. And when the guy gets eaten by the ants, the first guy does, I'm like, whoa, this is okay. This is different. I wasn't expecting to see this. And then to see the last guy not only start to get eaten, but dragged into the anthill. I'm like, that's cool. It's just a very cool scene watching them fight. And then you got the car chase going on. Now, getting back to the fight, when they're on the truck, I like how the execution was done to it. As I was watching it today, when Marion starts arguing with Indy, and I think he knew she was trying to get him to get upset so he would do something. You know what I mean? So he took the anger out on the guy when he's like, "Why did you do that?" You know, something like that, and he starts kicking the guy. And then Mutt joins in as if he knew what was going on as well. The only part I didn't find believable was when he shot the what do you call it? The bazooka, and you see the giant saw come towards them. That was a little bit too far fetched to me.
As opposed to what else?
Well, no, I didn't mind the monkey. You know, for some reason, when I saw that the monkey swinging scene, it made me think of Planet of the Apes for some reason. I don't know if that was a nod to it or what, but
Well, probably Tarzan.
That's it, Tarzan.
Because the original Tarzan serial would be around that era when Indy was younger, so it makes sense to reference a Tarzan.
Right, yeah. and from what I know is that when they did press for this film, Shia LaBeouf, whatever, criticized the film, saying, you know, and he apologized for it, saying, look, I know this is an iconic film. It's one of my favorite films of, you know, franchises. I dropped the ball, and it's not the writer, it's not the director, it's the actor's job to show what the writer put on paper and make it come to life. And he goes, I dropped the ball with the rope swinging, the monkey swinging part. He was not a fan of that part. So that, and I can understand it looked a little too cheesy, but I also found it cool because it was like, I'd like to swing with those monkeys. But I think the great outcome from that scene was once he landed in the car and he was getting beaten up, the monkeys all saw that, jumped in the car with him, and started attacking the others. As if they were like, no, this is our friend. You don't touch him. We're going to take care of this, which I liked. I thought that the car scenes, you know, with the fencing and stuff, that's Earl Flynn right there. That's like Robin Hood, Earl Flynn time. So you could see lots of nods to different film franchises, lots of nods to things that they were fans of that period. I enjoyed that. I just didn't like, how at one point Mac was, "Oh, I'm helping you out. I'm helping you out," and Indy's got him, and he's like, "No, no, no. I'm CIA. I'm CIA. Don't you remember when I said just like Berlin?" And he goes, "Double agents."
I wanted to kill you.
Where it turns out, they decide they're going to drive off a cliff. She's driving off a cliff, like, no, no, don't do this. And it's like you would expect Indiana Jones to make that decision that he's going to drive off the cliff and into the water. But it was Marion doing that, which in some ways it was a brilliant idea, but also just too, I don't know, forced or not, or miswritten. But what I loved.
Yeah.
But what I found not believable about that, and I have a thing where I don't go to a movie to believe this and that, but what was a little bit not believable about that is when it went off and it landed in the tree and the tree went down and it brought it down and they get out and the tree goes flying back up like a cartoon and it knocks everybody into the ocean. And then once they get into the ocean, you hear John Hurt's character goes, "It drops 3 times." What is he talking about? It drops 3 times. And then you got Indy going, "No, there." And you see the waterfalls. So anybody would not survive those waterfalls.
Yeah. Another thing about what you would survive or not is during the chase, there's numerous times where the Soviets are firing off their machine guns and apparently the leaves are bulletproof. Because they're not getting hit, especially it's most egregious when they're at the ant scene and they're running all back inside the duck and there's only a few scant branches standing like in between and all the Soviets are there firing their machine guns again and luckily they're not hitting Marion or Mutt when they're racing to get back inside. It's like, okay, this is getting a little cartoonish, kind of like when the ants are.
Also unbelievable is Cate Blanchett's character on the front of the duck shooting the gun that could have killed Marion at any time, but she's like this. So it was a little cartoony, but I enjoyed that fight where they keep going from car to car to car, and it made me wonder: it was that CGI? Were they doing it on a set? Was it done, standing still, and everything was just computer generated around it? So it made me wonder about that scene. Were they really doing it in cars?
It's a lot of trouble. It's a lot of trouble for a hot potato moment with the skull.
Yeah, but I'll say this is that every time I saw, and I love Cate Blanchett. She's probably a nice person. I don't know her for real, but her character, I just wanted to see her character get punched in the face, or stabbed, or fall off a car, or accidentally run over, or blown up, whatever it could be, because she just was that annoying. Her character was that, and trust me, I'm sure she did the best job she could playing that character, but it was annoying because, as I said before, I was waiting for her to announce Moose and Squirrel are coming. We must get up. We must get the skull before Moose and Squirrel find us.
Exactly.
So I guess I'm the only one who really liked her character throughout. I had a blast with her. She was fully committed to the character.
Yeah, but I will say this is from that car scene to the waterfall scene. Once you get to that car scene, you're like at basically on the 3rd act already. So that, even though it's a bit of almost a 2-hour something movie, once you get to that car scene, everything's all action to the end, and it just flies by.
Yeah, that's another unique way they did the structure of this movie. Because unlike Raiders, which peaks with the truck chase and then kind of lulls out for quite a while, this one doesn't do that. It's like once the jungle chase starts, it takes off and it doesn't really stop. Even when they're going down the waterfall and they're realizing eventually they catch on that they should jump out of the duck when it goes into the water. Too high to not sustain injuries, but of course it's Indiana Jones movie, they're going to be fine. Like when Marion finally, at the very bottom of it, the duck is finally broken to pieces and she's just sitting there laughing maniacally, holding the steering wheel. That It's like
Hey,
it got dislodged from there, but it didn't impale her and kill her. But okay, and then you have that arbitrary moment where Indy's like, "All right, I'm gonna go the rest of the way. None of you have to come. Why? Because it told me to." But they're like,
it almost made me. That moment made me think. Okay, so I think when the skull looked at Indiana Jones, when he looked at it, the skull looked at him and could tell what kind of person he was, and probably saw all his memories of things he's done in the past, and probably went, okay, this is the one who's going to get me home. This is the one who knows what he's doing. So that's why when he said, the skull told me to, that must mean that the skull trusted him. I know that sounds far-fetched, but that's what it made me think.
Well, it's the same thing that happened to Oxley. He told Oxley to take it back, and Oxley didn't do it. So
yeah,
but
it probably it knew from where Indiana was that it wouldn't drive him crazy, though.
Well, the only reason it didn't drive him crazy was because they covered it with the mat. But it probably, because again, Oxley would have done it on his own if the Soviets just hadn't captured him, and then they couldn't interpret what he was saying. Whereas if they had just followed Oxley instead of capturing him, he would have led him straight there. And so Indy's kind of doing the same, but they decide they're going to follow him anyway. They go through the Skull Cave, and then you have that kind of neat thing where you have all of the tribesmen kind of emerge out of the wall, which is like, how did you plaster yourselves up in the wall like that? It's like, I don't know, but it looks cool.
You just have to wonder that every time they have to change the guard, because they have to take breaks from being hidden in all those corridors. You have to wonder, okay, we need to time this precisely so that every time that we change people, we're not doing what people are coming in here unannounced.
Right. And then you get to see, all the hieroglyphs with the whole chariots of the gods thing, that it taught them how to, the wall, how to fertilize the ground and to make, raise the crops and to purify the water and to build the temple, the type of temple that, by the way, couldn't exist in South America because the type of granite doesn't exist down there. So feeding into this whole chariots of the gods type narrative, and eventually when they realize they're being followed, they take off and they have to sprint down this spiral stairs where the stone steps get retracted into the wall. Kind of like a callback to Raiders, where you have these overly complex traps. Mm-hmm. And when they get to the bottom, you find more of the armored skeletons of Oriana's crew. All the Spanish stuff, all mangled, and so they go from there. And you get to it. Admittedly, I thought a really cool visual when you get to see the big exterior shot of the temple, how it's overgrown, and Indy all get captured, and Indy ends up having to use the skull to free them because the natives aren't gonna touch it, and they're gonna back off from it. And then they go back up and they do this other weirdo MacGyver trap type, or Rube Goldberg type trap thing to level off the counterweight for this insane stuff that, aliens built it, so I guess it's okay.
Yeah, that's why when you mentioned earlier that, this wouldn't work well or be available in South America at that time, well, if you throw in some aliens, it could.
Yeah. Oh, actually, this is the part where they go down the spiral stair, because the sand, the counterweight gets dropped, the sand caves in below them, and Mac, of course, is frustrated because he doesn't think, where's all the money? Such a waste of my time. It's like, okay, you're basically every other such character from movies like this, like Benny from The Mummy, and
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go first.
I have a question. How we're talking about how the elaborate structure, the Rube Goldberg machine kind of structure. We've seen kind of those elaborate settings in the last three movies. But when you're introducing aliens, at this point, you ask yourself, okay, how much of this is done by the local natives and how much is done by the spacemen?
Right.
Because I always liked the idea that in the last three movies, that whatever cultures created those type of, elaborate structures, you're just like, man, kind of makes you wonder just what they were able to accomplish with just, brine and stone. And here, when you throw aliens in, and you ask yourself, okay, so how much is them and how much is them?
Right. Because then they further go down the passage into the main chamber where they find artifacts from all around the world, from cultures separated by thousands of years and thousands of miles. And Indy concludes that they were like archaeologists. And so it's basically taking the chariots of the gods thing and extending it to a global thing, like these aliens, these interdimensional beings, sort of created human civilization, which again, it's the trope of the Indiana Jones movies to validate all the religions of the world in a sense. And so, okay, and they go inside the main chamber, and here is Positive Fandom says, I had no idea there would be so many other skulls. Yes, so according to the New Age hippie religion out of San Francisco, which came up with this whole idea, there were supposedly 15 of them, because at that time that they came up with it, there were supposedly 15 real crystal skulls in the world, which had not yet been authenticated and debunked by Hewlett-Packard from their tests, determining that they're all knockoffs from the late 19th century, capitalizing on, the people's ignorance, thinking that, oh, well, there's so much skull iconography in here, so people will believe that there's crystal skull. They'll buy this, And so the way the New Age religion went is that if you reunite all 15 skulls at this temple via Chariots of the Gods style, they would all be united as a hive mind and the knowledge. And so that's kind of where they're sourcing that story from. And they never explain why the one crystal alien is missing its skull and how that even happened. It's just that it is. And even though Indy and the heroes got well ahead of the Soviets because they went down the waterfall, inexplicably, the Soviets are just right behind them. And Mac just pulls a gun on him again. And he's like, what, are you a triple agent? He's like, nah, I just lied about being a double. And so basically everything they've done for the last 40 minutes or so has been undone because they just caught right back up with him in no time flat.
This movie was filmed on regular film stock because that's what George and Steven Spielberg wanted. And it was filmed, the DP was Janos, the man he's worked with since Schindler's List. So this guy had to watch all of the previous Indiana Jones movies to get all the shots just right and the right look to it. But in the end, Steven Spielberg had to let his pride go and had to take on the look of a younger director. But he wanted it to look as if you would think that this movie was made 5 years after The Last Crusade.
Yeah, it ends up looking like it's made 20 years later, like it was, because to me, it's just too shiny.
But the comment you made earlier about the bringing the gun to a knife fight, that's nod to Sean Connery from The Untouchables.
Right.
Character says it. So there's little nods to everything in these films, but the nuclear blast was always in the script. And the guy who did the final version, David Cope, said that when he wrote the script, he kept the refrigerator scene in it because Frank Darabont wrote the previous script and he liked that scene, so he kept it in. He goes, the man is a god. He's one of my heroes. So I kept it in. I mean, what do you do when you're working for a god? You keep the thing that you liked and he did in. So that's why that scene was in there. Even though people do say, instead of jump the shark, it's nuked in the fridge.
Nuke the fridge. Yeah. So then we have the highly controversial, divisive ending of the film, where Spalko lets her obsession get the better of her, and she's like, oh, belief is a gift you've not yet been bestowed upon, Dr. Jones. And she's like, oh, I believe, sister. That's why I'm down here. And it's kind of funny because if the Soviets hadn't have shown up, I don't think Indy would have put the skull back. I think he would have seen that, okay, whoever took it to begin with must have had a reason for taking it and didn't trust whatever's going on in here. And so he's stepping back, and we see that Spalko is the one who returns the skull. Shortly after it starts becoming a hive mind, the portals are opening, the Soviets are getting sucked in, and we see that Oxley finally snaps back to reality, reminding them that, they're actually interdimensional beings in point of fact. And he throws them all out through the passages to escape, while she keeps up her obsession of wanting to know everything. And it seems like the alien obliges, because it's like burning lasers into her eyes or skulls from all the other aliens around as it gets merged into one, was way too CGI heavy. It looked too much like a cartoon at that point. I thought they should have merged it, like done something similar to what they did in The Last Crusade when they melted Donovan away. That was like a seamless cut from the actual actor Julian Glover to being, the puppet that was getting melted or whatnot, or the CG until it eventually became just the puppet. And I thought they should have done something like that for the alien to make it real rather than just pure CG. Because again, that just cartoonish aspect of it just really took me out of it. It basically gets dissolved into nothingness, and her ashes get sucked into the portal. And I didn't actually mind that ending. Again, I don't think it's any more absurd to have aliens as absurd and somewhat racist as the Chariots of the Gods premise is, because it's based on the idea that, the natives couldn't have possibly built all this technology themselves, and let's not bother asking experts what this actually means. No, it had to be aliens. Like, to me, it's no more ridiculous than all the major religions that in the world in terms of how you can debunk them and break down the literalism to realize that it's not. It's mostly metaphors and not real. And so I never had a problem with it. My problem is that once they get back to the surface away from the temple, while you have that really neat effect of seeing the temple collapse in on itself with like almost like a cyclone building around it, I thought, man, that looks really cool. But I hated when you see the actual flying saucer. That just seemed kind of like seeing the rugged Indy in the atomic town, seeing him standing on the hilltop, on a temple hilltop or whatnot, looking at a shiny, classic designed flying saucer just seemed really wrong. Like, this is not what Indiana Jones should really be. You don't need to show it. You can imply it enough, but you don't actually need to show that. Let it just...
I think with how much it was being built up, you kind of had to show it.
Or at least give it a different design so it doesn't look so...
But it does kind of fit the design of Roswell crash sites.
Yeah, I suppose that's true.
Process looked like. So it kind of does fit. I mean, I get what you're saying, but it also like, yeah, maybe they kind of did an audience test and somebody probably complained, where's the saucer? There's supposed to be a saucer here. You promised me a saucer.
So what did you think of this climax?
I liked it. I liked how, she, it goes back to the last three movies. Be careful what you wish for. You just might get it. And they even mentioned when they were in the tent scene that the cerebral cortex is the most underdeveloped part of the human brain. And if you can unlock it, you could unlock many abilities that are not yet available to us. And she's getting it from not just one mind; she's getting it from a hive mind of spacemen. So she's getting all that dump of information that she asked for, and it's her brain cannot handle it. So it obviously is going to turn with her being disintegrated. But I kind of feel like, man, these guys don't fuck around. You asked for it, okay, we'll give it to you. We're not going to save you, but we'll give it to you.
Yeah.
It's almost like the skull that they were transporting the entire time just got fed up with her shit. And it's like, oh, I'll give you all the knowledge, all right?
Yeah, I told the other guy to take me back here. You stopped him from getting there, you little bitch. He's like, I'm gonna
fuck you up. You know what? This is what we call skull fucking. I'm about to fuck you up.
What did you think of the climax, Tom?
When I think of the climax, I thought it reminded me a little. Hold on a second. Excuse me. It reminded me a little bit of Raiders of the Lost Ark. It had that was the big callback to Raiders with Arana, whatever her name is, Natasha. Her wanting to know everything. And especially when you know that when they get to the skulls and they're about to, as they're walking towards there, you see Mac drop the little indicator, leading them all to them, which amazingly somehow they all made it below the waterfall and over across the water and to the Mayan temple and all that stuff.
Down the cliffs and all that stuff.
And And then when he reveals the gun again, you get Indiana Jones going, "What are you, a triple agent?" And he goes, "No, no, I'm in it for the treasure, the prize." So now you got the trope of the one character that's just it's in it for the loot, So that's that trope from movies. You get that one character only into that. Then you get Indiana going to put the head on, and Natasha takes the head from him, puts it on the alien's head, and then you get Marion going, look at the eyes. And as the room's spinning, everything's starting to go away, and he's like, "What are these?"
I talked through the whole thing, but what did you think about? Like, did you like the climax, or do you think it's as controversial as everybody else seems to think? Where they're like, "Oh, aliens, they can't stand it." Like, what did you think? Like compared to the other films?
I thought when the blades were spinning and you saw that they were being sucked into another dimension, I would have rather not seen bright lights. I would rather have seen something of the other dimension. I would like to have seen where they were going. I would like to see where they were being sucked into, because that kind of interested me. Going, okay, so where are they being brought to? What world are they going to be? Are they going to make it through? Do they get sucked inside out? What happens to these guys? Do they get chopped up?
Because it looked like they were getting sucked into the deadlights.
Yeah, so I wanted to know like where they were going, and then you got Indy going, "Oh, we don't want to go there," and especially when he goes to save Mac.
Pennywise is what it is.
And Mac winks at him. It's like, "I'll be okay." It's like, okay, so you're just gonna sacrifice yourself? All right, fine.
Yeah, and then Indy gets all angry. He's like, "Damn it, Mac, now!" He just
but I did like how they had to get out of there. So they run out of there, and then you see everything being destroyed. So it was almost like, okay, we're gonna make it like we were never here. And I could almost picture the aliens once they got there saying, "All right, we got to put these things up so if we ever get to leave, we're going to make it like we were never here." And so you see everything getting destroyed, and then they get shot up through the water, which I kind of wish I could get brought up through water like that. That looked like fun. That'd be a great ride.
It's a 50s movie. They should have a big laser gun on their spaceship to a death ray and destroy everything.
But when you finally see the spaceship going up, and all the rocks just sort of float there, and then it disappears, and they all drop. It's like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And then you get Indiana asking where they're from. Were they going to space? And you got John Hurt going, "No, they're going to the space between spaces."
Right. So, but
and again, I would like I kind of wish I could see where they went. But as I said before, Indiana Jones films have the little Star Wars reference. So there is a hieroglyphics somewhere in one of the places of both C-3PO and R2-D2, but also E.T. as well.
In the Well of the Souls.
Yeah, and then you get but in this movie you see 3CPO and R2-D2, and then there's also one of E.T. But the biggest callback to Star Wars is, "I have a bad feeling about this," which, I was like, okay, I wasn't expecting to hear that catchphrase in the film. And
I agree the design felt off, specifically the sharp edges of the saucer. I don't know why, but that looked out of place. Yeah, it's 50s sci-fi, so
yeah. I mean, it did have that 50s ending. I didn't find it controversial. I think I would have liked to have seen it. Even though you see it disappear in some way, but they disappear between the rocks, and that's it. And I think Spielberg wanted it where, okay, I don't want it to look like Close Encounters leaving. I don't want it to look like E.T. leaving. So we'll have it go behind the rocks, it disappears, and then the rocks drop, and that's it. Because he didn't want it to look like E.T. or Close Encounters because it's too close to home. And he's also called this film the sweet dessert that audiences get because they had to take the bitter dinner of Munich.
I didn't think that was a bad movie. I didn't think that was a bad film. I didn't think Munich was a bad film.
But because it was so tough. I think he meant because it was like a very tough subject.
Yeah,
so he felt that this was the sweet, easy dessert to take after seeing such a tough movie to watch.
Yeah, but even I get what he's getting at, but at the same time, people watch other movies, right, Steve?
Yeah.
Like Munich is not the only movie they watched that weekend.
Yeah. Yeah. So then you have John Earl, like a broom to their footsteps, and they're gone. And then he finds out that Mutt is Indy's son, and Mutt kind of accepts that by addressing him as dad, which is like a callback sort of to Last Crusade, because throughout this movie, once Mutt finds out he's his father, he just keeps hitting back, "You're not my dad, okay?" over and over again until he finally accepts that. So, and he's like, "Yeah, somewhere your grandfather's laughing." So when we get to the epilogue, it's like, okay, you have the wedding of Indy and Marion, and they tease that Mutt is going to pick up the hat, and I'm like, oh God, no, please no. And then Indy snatches it from him. I'm like, oh, good. It's like nobody wants to see that.
Yeah. If not for it's almost kind of like a breath of relief, a sigh of relief that they didn't kind of follow up on that, and it was just like a wink to the camera. Oh no, he's not going to be the next Indiana. No, there's only one Indiana Jones, because with everything that happened with Shia in 5 years later, it's kind of like, whoo, dodged a bullet there.
Yeah, and then
and I don't hate Shia for the stuff he does off screen, but I'm just saying it would have been like an Ezra Miller situation for him if he was like going to be the next protege for Spielberg.
Right, and I know they wanted to get Sala and Short Round in that wedding scene too, but both of them declined because they didn't want to.
Not only that, but they also wanted Willie as well.
Yeah, or actually, I can't. Maybe they didn't ask Short Round because I imagine Key would have said yes.
Yes, he would have said yes.
John Rhys-Davies said no.
Said no because he felt the audience would have felt cheated if he was just a background character in that scene.
Right.
And that's why he didn't. And one of the original scripts still had Marion in it, but it didn't have Mutt in it. And Mutt was named after John Williams.
Well, another thing, they were in one of the early scripts, the villains were gonna be Lao She and his son from the surviving son from the beginning of Temple of Doom. And that script actually lasted for a bit. And then they dropped it, and both actors were still around and game to do it. So I thought that would have been fun if they'd done that, but
nice try, Lau.
Yeah. I want to see the look on Lau's face when he finds out reads in the paper, Indiana Jones credited with saving a higher village of children and crashing satanic cult in India. That would be
to the heavens like Khan.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
it's funny. We're getting this after this movie. There was an article written, I want to say on June 16, 2009, where Shia LaBeouf has said that Spielberg was gearing up for a 5th Indiana Jones movie. And it's like, well, we all knew it was going to happen. This was from firstshowing.net. Spielberg would make an Indy 5, whether we wanted it or not, but we haven't heard much about it. And I think a lot of people were hoping that they would have just given up by now, but that's not the case. In a recent interview with the BBC, Shia LaBeouf says Steven Spielberg just said that he cracked the story on it before I left, and I think they're gearing up. He doesn't say much else except that there are definitely no special effects in that movie, but it's enough of an update to remind us that this is indeed coming soon. And then 15 years later, here we are with a lot of special effects.
Yeah, it was made because Spielberg's son said, when are you making that? When are the next 2 Indiana Jones movies coming out? So it meant Kingdom of the Crystal Skulls and then Dial of Destiny.
Well, at the time it wasn't Dial of Destiny. It was really different.
Right. And this movie was in the works since '93, and originally it was going to be dedicated to River Phoenix. If it was done in '93, it would have been dedicated to him because that's when River Phoenix died.
I
My
would have
God,
if you're
30
going to do
years.
that, they should have dedicated it to Denham Elliott first, because he was Marcus in 2 of the movies. He had died in 92. Because he said, looking back on it, the movie had a 77% critic rating on Rotten Tomatoes, 53% audience rating. Well, the audience rating was initially a little higher, because now we've had another 15 years worth of ratings come in from users. But I'm not really sure. I can't imagine that Spielberg would have dived much into the internet fandom space that was growing back then to see how much fans, how vitriolic a lot of them were. But apparently Lucas was familiar with it. And I think Lucas may have had more to do with pulling the plug on Indy 5 than Spielberg, especially if Spielberg had already cracked the story. And Harrison, like he says, yeah, they had the wedding scene at the end because they weren't, they kind of want to have the cake and eat it too. It's like, well, if we don't get to do another one, let's have a happy ending, but you can still do another one if we want to, which is why he snatches the hat away. But it just kind of, it took forever. For the longest time, there was a rumor that the new Indy 5 was going to be about the Nazi gold train of doom, the Nazi gold train, which never confirmed to be in existence. But that's supposedly where the Nazis dumped all the treasures at the end of the war when they were retreating behind their own lines, and the train was supposedly buried in a mine or something. And nobody's ever proven that such a thing exists, but maybe that's kind of what they're homaging in what it looks like for the trailers from Dial of Destiny.
Nazis, cat. Nazis.
Yeah, see, they should go to other bad guys, because it's like you can go back to that well so many times, and then it's like, okay, you're not really trying to be unique.
But it's easy. Anymore. It's easy to hate Nazis.
They should go after maybe the Imperial Japanese too. That'd be more entertaining for a new.
Yeah, but then you can just drop a bomb and call it a day.
Nah, that's better than that. So
you know what would have been cool, even not knowing what's going to happen in this movie. It would have been cool to just, if we do get a 6th one, which I doubt, this will probably be the last one. It would have been cool to just go back to the Ark of the Covenant.
Well, one of the things in that warehouse, not only do you see the Ark of the Covenant, which is very, quick and you miss it, there's also the staff of Moses in there as well.
Right. There's probably other things in there too, but I mean, going back to the Ark, it's like, what, is he going to steal it from the government? It's like there's other artifacts and other mythologies out there worth exploring.
Well, I know, but it would have been cool if you can go back to the Ark, but then the Ark is one part of a grander scale. You need more artifacts that requires for like this grand design. That would have been cool. And now that you bring up the staff of Moses, imagine a scene where Indy's holding the staff and it turns into a snake, and he just bent like, shit.
Well, the staff of Moses was an alluding to an Indiana Jones story from like 2009 or something like that, or maybe from a script, one of the scripts, that he was going to find it, or he had found it. So yeah, they went through a lot of Indiana Jones mythology for some of the stuff, but there are very much a lot of callbacks to The Last Crusade in this film as well. But because Shia criticized the movie, not only did he criticize it, Harrison Ford goes, he's a fucking idiot for doing that. And then it ruined his relationship with Spielberg, which is probably why he wasn't in the other Transformer movies. Because of his,
he wasn't in there because of his behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah.
Well, he said. Well, he did say in later interviews, in hindsight, he soured his relationship with Spielberg. Is the way Spielberg told it to him is that, there's a time to be sincere and there's a time to be a used car salesman.
there's a time to be sincere and the time to sell cars, and it's the time to sell cars.
Right. This is funny. Daniel's Hot Topics chiming in. He says, how can Indiana Jones sleep at night after he killed all those people on his adventures? Did you see how many people he killed in Temple of Doom? There were the cult members on the bridge of Molaram. Well, who cares about Molaram and the cult members on the bridge? Those guys were evil.
It's funny. I just saw...
I know you're probably being sarcastic, Daniel, but that's funny.
Here it is. The body count in this movie is 47. 18 by Indiana Jones.
Oh, that's interesting. I would figure body count things would be restricted for, slasher films and John Wick movies.
Well, let's not be looking into that one because God only knows how much there were in that movie.
Every movie has a body count, even the children.
Yeah, I just meant the people who go out of their way to take the time to actually count it. But so yeah, I don't hate this movie as much as everybody else does. Again, it does feel a bit overly goofy at times. It's trying to be a 50s sci-fi movie with the Indiana Jones formula in there, as opposed to feeling as real and authentic as the first three films. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it's like he's 65, so I kind of roll with it because it's not believable that multiple times in this movie you have all these, again, Soviets who are militarily trained. Like he's literally walking up the boxes in the warehouse and they're standing right there and they can't hit him. There's literally nothing blocking him. And it's like that type of stuff just kind of bugs me that you see going on, throughout, or like I said, when he crashes through the steel frame on the windshield and it doesn't bother him, but then later when he gets punched by Dovchenko, it does, which like you'd expect it to. So all those types of inconsistencies, or like Ernesto, you mentioned with the, how the skull is sometimes magnetic and other times not, So yeah, I still liked it. I didn't think it was hot garbage like so many people. Like I participated in a watch along of these movies in our Star Wars group, and on September 23rd, 2021, we watched this one, and we brought on the late great Rich, one of our Star Wars members there, and he notoriously hates this movie, and I kept trying to poke the bear to get him to just unleash and tear this a new one, but I couldn't get him to do it. He was trying to be too polite on the thing, but even the Star Wars fans who are like not shills, but love everything Star Wars, no matter what it is, even they were raining hot coals on this movie. And I'm like, oh my God, but I never really felt that way about it. I didn't hate it that much.
Okay. So I have an answer to this question.
Yeah.
Okay. Why don't you read the question and then I'll give the answer.
Okay, Daniel says, how many Thuggee members were on the bridge when Indy cut the rope and sent them to Shiva? There were like 16, then he caused Molaram to fall to his death. Yeah, but they're all the bad guys torturing and enslaving children and ripping people's hearts out, so who cares?
Well, I actually have an answer to the body count question in all the Indiana Jones films. So we just did the fourth one. In the first movie, there are 9 deaths in the original movie alone that were directly caused by Indiana Jones. And around 14 are in the second movie and 9 in the third movie.
Mm-hmm.
9?
So 9.
9?
That's
9?
50 people that he's killed. That's 50 people that he's killed across the 4 films. What were you going to say, Ernesto, after I summed up my feelings of not hating this movie?
Oh, no. It's just, I was looking at Daniel's question, and it's just like, well, they're bad guys. Who cares? And I'm like, Daniel does.
Well, Daniel loves Temple of Doom. It's his favorite. And it's like, part of the reason it's one of my favorites, too, is because Indy's altruistic. I think it's got the best villain, and they're easy to hate. Because, yeah, Nazis are easy to hate, but in this movie, you never really get to see the Nazis doing anything that evil. And that's why Spielberg said, after he made Schindler's List, he would never make a movie like this with using Nazis as caricature villains like that. And I get it, but whereas with Temple of Doom, you actually see the bad guys doing evil things.
Yeah.
It didn't just rely on the history. Positive Fandom chimes in and says, I didn't dislike the film. I admit I wasn't prepared for the alien concept, so it surprised me.
Well, I was. Vincent Spielberg, he's the king of alien movies.
Well, Spielberg has come out and said, look, I didn't want the aliens in the film, but because George came up with it and he's my best friend, I guess
he did him a solid. And you know what? The fact that he was able to make the movie as good as it was speaks to the master at work. So you don't have to apologize that much. It's not a Schumacher situation. You're good, bro.
Daniel follows up saying, Indy sending fools to hell left and right. I was just fooling around, and I think it's cool that Indy is sending bad guys to Hades and droves. Absolutely. Yeah, we know you're kidding. Yeah, but that's yeah.
I was thinking of Daniel this morning when I checked the box office receipts. I'm like, oh shit, Daniel is gonna be up the wall at this point.
But there were like so many different titles for this movie. At one point, it was gonna be Indiana Jones and the Giant Ants, because they couldn't come up with a title.
Indiana Jones and the Lost and the Mysterians and
and they couldn't use that because
Which
What it
sounds more like
reminded him of something else called the Mysterians, and
which Indiana Jones and the Mysterians sounds kind of like some '60s band. It's like
yeah.
psychedelic band.
Right now on the big show, it's Indiana Jones and the Mysterians. Give it up for the Mysterians and Indiana Jones.
This
So
is like the Nazis I punched to get over here.
yeah. Oh,
And
I
that's
forgot.
why they didn't include the Nazis in this one because Steven
historically,
Spielberg, after doing Schindler's List,
I said that. Yeah,
yeah,
they decided to do that anymore.
Yeah. Although
But-
you kind of could have gotten away with it. They probably could have been somewhere in Mexico.
but it'd be kind of lazy to do that again.
I know, I'm just saying.
About how many bullets do we give this film, Tom?
I give this one 8.
Ernesto?
I give it a 7.
Yeah, I give it a 7 as well.
Well, I was hoping you were going to give it a 6, and it would have been like 8, 7, 6.
6, 7. Yeah, it's between that. I mean, I do feel that if it just visually looked more like the first 3, that would also up the rating quite a lot. But that does really bug me when they do overly unnecessary uses of CGI and crisp. Like it looks almost like they DNR'd the hell out of it at some point.
Yeah,
and I did find out that the car scene, the jungle scene where they're in the cars, that was done with blue screen.
Yeah, but you can also kind of see this movie being a result of the prequel movies. How Lucas just did them all in blue screen or green screen, whatever you want to say. And there were no real sets to begin with. I mean, I'm sure there were sets in the first one, but it was all pretty much computer generated.
Yeah,
so you can kind of see like the dueling dragons between how Spielberg likes to be more practical, and Lucas is just like, yeah, but we can save a lot of money by using CGI.
Yeah, Phantom Menace actually had more practical effects on that movie than the entirety of the original trilogy combined. And you can tell the difference too when you look at the 4K transfer because they shot it also on film.
But this movie is also like the result of that too. Like who has more control over the look of it? And it's just like hey, I'm gonna make this movie for you, but give me some practical, damn it.
Yeah, absolutely. A great stream tonight. Positive Phantom says thank you. Happy Face of Diamond.
Gracias.
It's funny because James Mangold was saying the same thing when promoting Dial of Destiny, but watching the trailers, it looks like there's a lot of CG in it.
Yeah.
So
especially in the subway scene, that's definitely CG.
Yeah, and then certain angles on the tuk-tuk chase look a little kind of wonky, and
hell, the entire scene in the parade looks very CG.
Oh yeah, I assume they would have fixed it, but there was a shot of him in the trailer on the horse where you could tell it was like a CG face. It was just really But that's probably because they had to get the trailer out early. I'm assuming or hoping, but
hopefully.
I'm still excited to see the movie. Admittedly not through the roof like I should be. Like I was through the roof anticipating this one because it's like the first 3 movies were so good, and I tempered my expectations a bit because again he was 65. But and strangely, I don't really remember the trailers for this one very much. But then I saw it, and it's like, yeah, I really liked it at first, and then watching it now, it's still enjoyable. But so we'll see. But yeah, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, not the dumpster fire that most of fandom says it is, but definitely the weakest of the 4 for me.
But overall, a fun family film.
Yeah, definitely. I think so too. Final thoughts, Tom?
I think I enjoyed watching the movie more than I was going to expect it. Watching it again, I haven't watched it since, a long time. And I don't think I watched it since I bought that set. I don't even think I even put that movie in when I got the new set. So I had fun with it. It's fun. It's an Indiana Jones movie. You get what you get. What else? What else can you not ask for?
Here's the nice steel book for this one.
Yeah.
The Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
What was on the back of it?
The skull.
Oh, the skull.
Yeah, it's more bronze than crystal in that one.
Yeah, everything in this set is like bronze on white. And then you see on the back where they got the 4 MacGuffins. I don't like, however, how this is like a cheapy plastic cardboard box with, see how the top is bent because it never would hold it down good way. And you have these cheap cardboard flaps between it. They don't have the nice, foam padding and hard metal outside like you do for the ones I got up there. So yeah, I hope they do one for a box set for a nice box set for the 5 once.
So question is this.
Yeah.
If and when they do the box set for all 5 films, are you getting it?
Well, it depends on the artwork and the craftsmanship of the package. If it's just a flimsy thing, no. I'll just get the individual steelbook in that case. Or if it's a digibook, I don't know. We'll see. So, also, these ones only have the 4K discs. They didn't have... they had a bonus disc for Crystal Skull because there was so much stuff on it. But otherwise, at least I believe these are only the 4K. Yeah, this is 4K plus digital, which is false advertising because when I pre-ordered this, it said 4K plus Blu-ray plus digital. And then after it shipped, the product page from where I ordered it changed it to say this without changing the price, which it should have because it was only 4K now. But I already have that same digibook set that you have over there, which has got all the all the bonus features and stuff. Strangely, the one bonus feature they did not port over to the Blu-ray or the 4K is the 23-minute or so featurette about the pre-production and development hell for Crystal Skull and all the. And I'm not sure why they didn't port that over. Maybe they forgot. But then again, Lucasfilm did a shoddy job on porting over all those bonus features from the prequels onto their big Skywalker Saga box set from a few years ago. So I would love to work in the physical media business and making decisions about the artwork and what material they should have.
Well, don't you remember what Rob said in one of his videos that they fired the guy who was responsible for that?
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably a reason why.
Well, yeah, like ever since Warner Brothers hired George Felsenstein, he's been having to go back and fix a lot of their problems. And since he's taken over, you have not had as many product recalls for Warner Brothers releases, which is good because he knows what he's doing.
Yep.
I just hope that he's training proteges. So that'll be something. All right, so I guess we did our final thoughts. We got our bullets, and we will be back next weekend. Or if you're watching this on replay, maybe it's already available for a non-spoiler / spoiler discussion for Dial of Destiny. Don't worry, we will be very clear about when we go from non-spoiler to spoiler territory.
We promise it will not be like the last time we did a non-spoiler spoiler thing. When we go, this is non-spoiler, and someone who will not be named decided to announce a huge spoiler and just went right to spoilers. But we won't say who that is. But that person knows who he is, and the person better not do that again.
That person betrayed Shiva. Yes,
they betrayed Shiva and they got sucked into another dimension for it. He had the choice of having his heart ripped out. All right. Until next weekend sometime. We don't know if we'll be back on a Saturday or Sunday, or we haven't figured that out yet. But there will be 2 Dial of Destiny videos. One, the non-spoiler and spoiler discussion, and then a all-out spoilers open discussion with me and Scott. And so that'll be fun. So until next time, everybody, have a great night.
Dun, 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 dun.